Hare Krishna. So we warmly welcome His Grace Sureshwar Das Prabhu, as well as all the other devotees who have joined us from various parts of Canada, as well as from USA and Trinidad, and many more who will be joining us as well to this much awaited three-part series titled Srila Prabhupada, our Founder Acharya, which will be, of course, conducted by His Grace Sureshwar Das Prabhu. So today is the part 2 of the three-part seminar, and we are grateful to His Holiness Bhakti Marg Swami, Ladini Gopika, Venkat Prabhu, Vrinda Mother, and many others for making this seminar a reality. And our special gratitude goes to Sureshwar Das Prabhu for kindly agreeing to conduct this three-part seminar despite his busy schedule. So as I mentioned yesterday, initially the plan was for Prabhu to visit the Toronto area to conduct these seminars, but the silver lining due to this COVID pandemic is that devotees from across Canada can relish Srila Prabhupada's pastime at the same time as well. So a little bit more about this seminar. Today's session will also be for 2 hours, 1.5 hours of the contents of the class, and the last 30 minutes for question and answers. So if you're on Facebook, you can send in your questions through the comments section there. And if you're on Zoom, you can send your questions through chat, either private or public. You can send it to us and we'll bring it to the attention of Prabhu. For those of you who missed yesterday's session, the recording is out there and we will get the link to you. Yesterday was part 1, Sambandha, which was our founder Acharya. And today, the topic is missions route, which is Abhideya. And next Sunday will be the concluding part, which is Sunday, 13th of September. It's Prayojana. And the topic is, the title of the topic is To Love is to Cooperate. So some ground rules for today's seminar. Please remain muted throughout the seminar. And please also turn off your video. And as I mentioned, the last 30 minutes will be dedicated to question and answers. And we thank you for your kind cooperation. A little bit about Sureshwar Prabhu. Sureshwar Das Vanachari joined Hare Krishna movement in 1970. And Prabhu received his first and second initiations from Srila Prabhupada in 1971 and 1972. And over the years, Sureshwar Prabhu, his service has centered around Prabhupada's books, studying them, distributing them, helping to produce them, writing articles. So Dravid Prabhu today also glorified Prabhu's articles that are available there. And Prabhu's now teaching from them. So in 2011, when teaching at the Mayapur Institute for Higher Education, his concern over the lack of connection, of many younger devotees, because they were not feeling for our founder Acharya, and it reached a tipping point. So that year he began researching and presenting the seminar, Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya. So with the encouragement of GBC's strategic planning team, Prabhu has been traveling the ISKCON world with the Founder Acharya series since 2011, helping devotees deepen their relationship with commitment to and love for our beloved Founder Acharya, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Sureshwar Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Ananda Gauranga Prabhu. So in yesterday's Sambandha lesson, called Srila Prabhupada, our Founder Acharya, we deepened our understanding of Srila Prabhupada's relationship with us as Founder Acharya. Now today's lesson is my favorite lesson from the Abhideya part of my 10-part series. And we're going to explore how each of us can develop that relationship by deepening our commitment to Srila Prabhupada's mission. And this lesson will trace his mission's origin and development in India before it manifested in the West. So it more or less follows, if you've read the Lilamrita, A Lifetime in Preparation, that first volume of that Lilamrita series. There is the title slide, Lesson 4, His Mission's Roots, famous shot. 1972, October. Prabhupada is in Vrindavan, Radha Damodar temple. He's invited devotees to hear lectures on nectar devotion, which ran for many, many weeks. You could make a a seminar just based on the transcripts from those lectures. So the late great Jamuna Devi one day said to her friend, Vishaka, Prabhu, who's now the president of the manor, she said, Vishaka, you've got to come and see what I'm seeing. Because every day Jamuna had to leave Prabhupada's talks and go start making Prabhupada's lunch. So Jamuna said, so you got to see what and bring your camera. So you see in the picture, Prabhupada is looking out his window where he could see at that time Srila Rupa Goswami's samadhi, and he's actually posing. He's just about to start his lunch, and he's holding off until Vishaka gets the shot, and Vishaka, being a master photographer, got just the right shot, and now it's a classic shot of Prabhupada in his rooms at Radha Damodar. So 10 years before this photo was taken, Srila Prabhupada sat alone in his quarters. So that was 72 of the shot, and now in 62, Prabhupada was alone in his quarters, translating Srimad Bhagavatam and begging Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur for empowerment to execute Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's order to preach Krishna consciousness in the West. He had received the seed of that order during their first meeting with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in 1922. So this mission seed. I can't claim credit for this slide. I had, some years ago, I had a friend in Alachua who was from Brazil, and he had a friend in Brazil who was becoming a devotee who worked for Coca-Cola Brazil, and he was a web designer. So this devotee in Brazil was so thrilled with the seminar series that I was doing that he offered to take my humble PowerPoints and to make them world-class. So he did that with a bunch of, not all the slides, but and this is one of my favorite. So right in the vase, the pot, you see this beautiful, it was a BBT painting. So, okay, so in the vase, you see Abhay Charan Dey, who's closest to us on our right. His friend Narendranath Mullik, who's a little behind there in the white, behind Abhay Charan. And others listening to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati speak on the Alta Dunga Gaudiya Math rooftop in Calcutta, 1922. Many of you, I'm sure, know the story, how Prabhupada told us that I didn't want to go meet him. I had seen so many so-called sadhus, and they were all really not sadhus. They were just begging japatis. But my father was so liberal, he would invite them in anyway, and he would feed them. So Prabhupada said, up to that point, I had just met so-called sadhus, not real renunciates, but so-called renunciates. So I didn't want to go. So my friend Naren, he had to drag me, Prabhupada said. And while they were paying obeisances, young Abhay and young Naren, just while they were still down paying obeisances to the sadhu, as was the custom, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said those immortal words. You look like educated young men. Why don't you preach Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission all over the world in English? So right there was the seed. Right there. But Prabhupada said, I was a Gandhian. I was following Gandhi. So I felt obliged to question the sadhu. And so, as you may know, he said, well, who will listen? Who will listen to our Chaitanya's message? We're a captive nation. First, we have to get Swaraj, independence. Then people will listen to us. No one listens to a captive. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, oh no, Krishna consciousness is too important to wait for any change in politics. It is the urgent need of every living being. So right then and there, when young Abhay heard that, he was struck with wonder. And Prabhupada told us, quote, I accepted him as my spiritual master immediately. not officially, but in my heart. So Prabhupada told us that that was the real initiation, when he got the seed of the mission. That was the real initiation. And then by the time it was formalized in a ceremony, 11 years later in Allahabad, Prabhupada was really determined to please Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. So that was in 1922. And let's see, let's get some words on the screen. Ladini Gopika Mataji is now going to read.
While the two young men were still rising and preparing to sit, before any preliminary formalities of conversation had begun, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta immediately said to them, "You are educated young men. Why don't you preach Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message throughout the whole world?"
Mm-hmm. And then
Srila Prabhupada: "I was from a Vaishnava family, so I could appreciate what he was preaching. Of course, he was speaking to everyone, but he found something in me. I was so much struck with wonder."
Okay.
I could understand. Here is the proper person who can give a real religious idea.
Mm. Okay, that's premature. Okay, oh, let me get back. Okay, so yeah, so Naren on the way out said, "So what did you think, Abai?" Because Prabhupada told us somehow or other, even as a little child or in college or whatever, I was always the leader of my group. So they had all actually met. All Prabhupada's friends had seen Bhaktisiddhanta, and they were impressed. But they were reserving judgment until Abai gave his opinion, their leader. And so Naren says, "What did you think?" So Abai said, "Oh, he's wonderful. He's wonderful. I can see the Mahaprabhu's mission is in good hands. He can give a real religious idea. Here's the proper person." Yeah. So that was 22. So even though we had that dramatic seed-giving first meeting, Prabhupada, he was married. He had a child already, a girl. And Prabhupada told us, I wanted to join him immediately, but I was a married man, so I couldn't. And it would have been an injustice, Prabhupada said. Prabhupada was dharmic. He was dutiful. He wasn't going to abandon his family. So his strategy was because the astrologers had said he was supposed to be wealthy, so the strategy was, then I'll become another Birla. They're saying, okay, I'll make money, and with my accumulated wealth, later on, I'll do the mission. So in 1923, Prabhupada was working for Kartik Chandra Bose's laboratory, Bengal Chemical, and which was one of the first pharmaceutical producers in India. They were just coming in. And so Prabhupada was the best salesman, even though he was young. He was the best salesman out of the office. And he decided that he could probably do this, make more money on his own. So with Dr. Bose's blessings, Dr. Bose had been the family doctor of the days. So he really knew Abai and took him on, and because he knew him as very intelligent. So with Dr. Bose's blessing, Prabhupada left Calcutta for Allahabad, Prayag, and the arrangement was that he was going to open up his own shop and get the pharmaceuticals at a good price from Dr. Bose and build his business. So in 1923, Srila Prabhupada left his office manager job with Dr. Bose's laboratory in Calcutta and moved his family to Allahabad to start his own business, Prayag Pharmacy. The seed of Prabhupada's mission went with him. This is from the Lilamrita, a quote. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was often traveling, and Abai was busy with his family and business. So to arrange another meeting was not possible. Yet from their first very first encounter, Abai had considered Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati his spiritual master. And Abai began thinking of him always. I have met such a nice, saintly person. Whenever possible, Abai would seek out Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's disciples, the members of the Gaudiya Math, and they would also seek out Abai. So, let's see here. Okay, that's a little preview. We'll just leave it there. So Prabhupada told us that one fine day in 1928, Prabhupada was selling his pharmaceuticals, and in walk some renunciates from the Gaudiya Math, and immediately Prabhupada recognized them by their dress, their style, and they said, Abai Charande, we have heard you're a very nice Vaishnav, and that you're a good organizer, businessman. Can you please help us start a chapter of the Gaudiya Math in Allahabad? So Prabhupada was very enthusiastic because they came to him and he said, oh yes, sure, I have a lot of contacts in Prayag and I will certainly help you. So Prabhupada did, and that was the beginning of the Allahabad chapter of the Gaudiya Math, just doing a lot of organizing, doing a lot of networking, and let's see here. So yeah, that just sort of went on, and Prabhupada would join them sometimes for bhajans, and he was a good speaker, and he was arranging for them to actually build a nice temple. So then in 1932, Prabhupada was doing business still in Allahabad, although it was not going so well. Prabhupada told us that 3 times Krishna let me build up my business, and then 3 times Krishna dismantled it. Because Krishna did make Prabhupada wealthy, but in his own way and in his own time, later, much later, spiritually wealthy. So in 1932, Prabhupada heard about this fantastic program that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was organizing, Braj Mandal Parikrama. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, during that parikrama, all over Braj Mandal, was going to make use of the latest technology and advertising and present Krishna consciousness in novel ways. Because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was very keen on that, following Rupa Goswami and Yukta Vairagya. So Prabhupada, he wanted, even though he was so busy, still trying to make it big with pharmaceuticals, he snuck away for a day or two. And he went to Braj Mandal, and he caught up to the party at Koshi, a town called Koshi. And it was during Kartik. And as soon as he got there, he heard, I believe it was his godbrother, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, announce to the yatris that today, Guru Maharaj, this is the last day he'll be with us while we're on this parikrama. And so he's giving us a choice. We can either stay and hear him speak for the last time, or he said we can go to the nearby Sheshashayi Vishnu temple, one of these big spectacular 3-altar temples where it takes you 3 altars to see the full reclining body of Vishnu. The head and the mid portion, and then the legs and the lotus feet. So Prabhupada told us, so I was thinking, what will I see at this Sheshashayi? Let me stay and hear Guru Maharaj. That's what I really want. So Prabhupada turned out to be one of the only householders to stay. Almost everybody just flocked to see this big spectacular deity, the Sheshashayi Vishnu deity. And so Prabhupada said he was speaking in a very high philosophical way. I couldn't always follow him, but I loved to hear him speak. And it was just Prabhupada and another elderly, I think Babaji, a Babu in white. And I just loved to hear him speak, Prabhupada said. And the rest were brahmacharis and sannyasis. So later, Bhaktisiddhanta took note of that. So 2 years later, in 1935, okay, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. So anyway, so Abhay Charan Day heard Srila Bhaktisiddhanta speak, and then he had to rush back to Allahabad, Prayag, to continue his pharmaceutical business. And then when he got back, he heard from, I think it was a Tulananda brahmachari, who was one of the leaders, the organizers of launching a temple in Allahabad. Prabhupada heard that there was going to be an initiation coming up next year. So Abhay Charan Day said, oh, I'd like to take initiation. Can I be initiated? And so he was a very valuable member of the growing congregation there, even though there wasn't a temple yet. So Atulananda said, well, let me see. And because he wasn't in charge. And sure enough, he was allowed to be, the word came back, yes, he could be in the batch that was going to be initiated. So let's see here. Yeah. So when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta came in 1933 to Allahabad to launch the new Gaudiya Math chapter in that town, there were initiations. So the seed sprouts. So first the seed had been planted in Calcutta, and now the seed is going to sprout. And let's see what the words say. Mataji's going to read.
With folded palms, Abhay looked up humbly at his spiritual master. He and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta were now face to face, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta recognized him and was visibly pleased to see him. He already knew him.
So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had already seen him in Calcutta at El Tadanga, the original Gaudiya Math chapter rooftop, and then he saw him again in Kosi. So he marked him, and this is what's going to be said here. Go ahead.
Yes, he said, exchanging looks with Abhay. He likes to hear. He does not go away. I have marked him. I will accept him as my disciple.
So Prabhupada told us, because I was serious about hearing, now I'm serious about speaking. So that's the secret. The more ardent and enthusiastic we are to hear from Guru and Krishna and our founder Acharya especially, then we have something to say. And it's beneficial for us and for everyone. Okay, so that was in 33. And then 2 years later, in 1935, he's initiated now, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta just added Aravinda onto his birth name, Abhay Charana-Aravinda, one who is fearless at the lotus feet of Krishna, Das, servant. 2 years later, in 1935, Srila Prabhupada received 3 major blessings from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, each one prophetic. Now, between 33 and 35, what happened was Prabhupada decided that he was never really going to make it big in Allahabad. So he and a brother of his, teamed up, and they decided that the only way to make it big in India with the growing pharmaceutical industry was to go to the big city, Bombay, and try to make it big in manufacturing and in sales. Both, they had an idea. So they went to Bombay. It must have been in 34, because it was late November 33 when Prabhupada took Diksha. And so what happened was, so Prabhupada is making contacts. He's trying to, and even some other company tried to recruit him. And actually it was a really good offer. And later Prabhupada said, I was puffed up. I should have taken that offer. So anyway, he was trying to make it, he thought he could do it independently. So who should he run into in Bombay at that time, now Mumbai? So it's Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj and Bhakti Saranga Maharaj. And they've been ordered by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta to go open up a chapter in Bombay. But they're not having much success, and it's just kind of a repeat almost of what happened in Allahabad. Oh, Abhayacharya Aravinda. Yes, you were very instrumental in the launch of the Allahabad Gaudiya Math, and we're having a hard time, and we know you're a good preacher, you're a good organizer. Can you help us? So there's Prabhupada. He's trying to, fulfill his strategy of just focusing on business and become another Birla. But here are the sadhus again. They're approaching, and he's initiated now, and that's taken his Krishna consciousness to another level. And he's, again, very happy to see them, and he said, surely I will help you. So they, with Abhayacharya Aravinda's help, sure enough, things start to happen, the contacts, and he's even more, Prabhupada, sometimes when we'd say, Prabhupada, you play the harmonium so beautifully. And so Prabhupada said, yes, I learned, and that was very good because it was a tool for me, to preach and sing. And so everyone was loving Abhayacharya Aravinda Prabhu's harmonium playing and singing. It's like virtuoso. When you hear Prabhupada play the harmonium, nobody quite plays like him. It's inimitable. And then his singing, of course, is so full of Krishna Prem. And he's a great preacher. He's always reading the books of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and attentively. So he really knew how to represent in his own words the philosophy for the ever-changing time and audience. So 3 big things happened in 1935. And the first was the launch, the official launch of the Bombay Gaudiya Math. And because Prabhupada was a very proficient English preacher, both in the spoken word and the written word, he was selected to give the keynote address in February 1935 on the occasion of the auspicious launch date was on the occasion of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's appearance. And so Prabhupada gave a great speech, and it was called The Universal Teacher. And it used to be printed in all of our Vyasa Puja books. The BBT used to print that speech every year. And now they don't do it every year, they do it occasionally. But that's how the Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja book was begun. It was Prabhupada's own Vyasa Puja offering to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and it was great. It was all about how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is not simply an ordinary guru, but he's a Jagat Guru, and he's capable of delivering the whole world, and it was just glorifying him as the founder Acharya of the Gaudiya mission. So, but then there was something even more that pleased, because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta heard about the speech. I think he might have even gotten a transcript. And then young Abhayacharya Aravinda, who's now, I guess, in his, 39 years old, because it was 1935, so +4 for 1896. He's in his late 30s. And he recited a poem. And I was tickled to find a recording of Prabhupada reciting the most favorite stanza in the poem to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. You may remember the poem starts, adore, adore ye that holy day, blessed than heaven, sweeter than May, when he appeared at Puri, that holy place, my Lord and Master, his divine grace. It's beautiful poetry in English. So the next slide, we're going to hear Prabhupada reciting this stanza that most pleased Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. And there's a little audio icon. And what's in the vase there is not quite, that's going to be the picture that's going to go with the 3rd blessing that year. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is looking very grave. But this is in February. And here's Prabhupada reciting that stanza.
Absolutely sentient thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity thou hast moved.
And this poem was actually found in 1969 or 70, I forget which, probably 69, by Guru Das Prabhu, my godbrother. And he was of course, he was one of the original people who launched London, pioneered London. Guru Das and Jamuna, Mukunda and Janaki, Shamsundar and Malati. So Guru Das went to the British Museum. It was either the British Museum or the Royal Asiatics. I think it was the British Museum. And because the very place where they launched ISKCON London was in a very, prestigious part of town. And it was only because George Harrison, George Hari's son, Prabhupada loved to play with words, so he broke George's name down like that. George Hari's son underwrote the loan, the bank loan, to get in there, that they were able to even get in just because of George's name. So it was not far away was the British Museum, and so Guru Das was rummaging. He had this idea that maybe I can find some of these old harmonists, because Bhaktisiddhanta had this magazine, The Harmonists, and maybe I can find some of the old harmonists, and I could find that poem that Prabhupada is always talking about. This poem. Sure enough, it was in an old harmonist. So I think he must have made a photocopy or something, and he brought the poem to Prabhupada. This is 34 years after Prabhupada wrote the poem in 1969. And Prabhupada was delighted. Oh, I thought this was lost. Thank you so much. And so Prabhupada read the poem and read this stanza. Absolute ascension, thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity, thou hast proved. And then Prabhupada, he's the origin of, quote, book changes, because he changed one word in this stanza. He edited it. Because with poetic license, you could sort of make out what Prabhupada meant when he said, thou hast moved, but he really meant removed. So 34 years on, Prabhupada's English was becoming a little more nuanced and precise. So he changed moved to removed. So that's why you see it both ways when it's quoted or printed. And so that's a little funny note, because people are always in uproar about, editing, book editing and all this. Well, Prabhupada, he edited this right there, from moved to removed. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, this is right from the Lilamrita, quote, somehow in this simple stanza, or especially in this couplet, Abai had captured the essence of his spiritual master's preaching against the Mayavadis. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta took as an indication of how well Abai knew the mind of his Gurudev. Abai was delighted when he heard that the couplet was pleasing to his spiritual master. One of Abai's godbrothers compared this verse by Abai to a verse in which Rupa Goswami had expressed the inner thinking of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and had thus moved him to ecstasy. Okay, so that was the first major blessing, because what happened was, now Mataji's going to read.
Srila Bhaktisiddhanta instructed the editor of The Harmonist, whatever he writes, publish it.
Huge. All of a sudden, everybody knows that Abhayacharya Aravinda Das is a very confidential disciple, because Bhaktisiddhanta wants, whatever he writes, publish it. He wants everyone to read what his disciple, Abhayacharya Aravinda, is thinking and writing. Carte blanche. Whatever he writes, publish it. Whoa, that's big. So that's a major, major blessing. That was in February 35. Now let's see, yes. Now we're going to fast forward to July of that year, because something else happened in July. That very Mandir that Prabhupada helped those Gaudiya Math sannyasis launch in Bombay was visited by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. And Bhaktisiddhanta was very pleased, very well organized. A lot of books were being sold, and a lot of people were coming, a lot of guests. It was very clean. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta complimented the Mahant, the head of the Mutt, who was Bhakti Saranga Maharaj. And Bhakti Saranga Maharaj gave a very interesting response to the compliment that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta paid him. So now Mataji is going to read what Bhaktisiddhanta or Bhakti Saranga said.
Bhakti Saranga Maharaj admitted that much of the work was due to Abhay Babu, who had collected funds and established the new center. Why is Abhay living separately? Bhakti Saranga asked. He should be president of the Bombay Center.
Nice. He was very appreciative of, he wasn't trying to hog all the credit or something. He was passing it on right to Abhayachara Aravinda. And now famously, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta replies this.
Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati replied, "It is better that he is living outside your company. He will do. When the time comes, he will do everything himself. You don't have to recommend him."
Oh, wow. This is like a prophecy. And Prabhupada, he heard about that comment, and it wasn't until 1977 on a train ride from Bombay to, I believe, Vrindavan, that, or at least Delhi, that Prabhupada he reflected on that. And here's what Prabhupada actually said. This is a transcript of the recording. Prabhupada said, "So after hearing that Guru Maharaj said that it is better that he is living a little away from your mutt, and when time will arise, he'll do everything. He hasn't got to be advised. I could understand," and then Prabhupada laughs, "why he said like that. Or I could not understand why he said like that." In other words, what does that mean? I will do everything myself? Why he said like that? And then Prabhupada says, that means he was so kind that he expected that I shall do something. That was my asset, his blessing. And I was thinking that this mission must be done very nicely. Although I was not capable to do anything, I was thinking like that. So desire was there, and maybe blessing was there. Yes, there was no question of my qualification. So this isn't until 1977, when Prabhupada has successfully exploded Krishna consciousness in all the major continents. And now he's reflecting on that blessing. He will do. Look, there's the screen. When the time comes, he will do everything himself. You don't have to recommend him. Okay, now this perfectly transitions into the next blessing. So far we have February 35, July 35, a very cryptic kind of blessing there. And now we fast forward to November, and now we look at the vase, and again, there's Vrajmandal Parikrama, and they're actually at Radhakund. That's what's in the background. And now Prabhupada is holding on to his little son, Mathura Mohan, who had become kind of a darling of the Gaudiya sannyasis. And you see the sannyasis are behind Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and Abhayachara Aravinda, because Bhaktisiddhanta liked to confide in the person who would become our Prabhupada. And Prabhupada told us this, that I only saw my Guru Maharaj, maybe 5 or 6 times. And whenever I met him, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he insisted on telling me confidential things. And sometimes he even insisted that I sit right with him on the same seat. And the godbrothers would see this and they would say, "Oh, fools rush in where angels fear to tread." They'd quote the English maxim, and then Prabhupada said, "Well, fool I may have been, but what could I do? Guru Maharaj, he wanted to say something confidential to me." So there they are at Radhakund, and you see that angst, that look of anxiety on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's face. And this is the third. This blessing is very grave. Okay, so let's let Mataji read now. Okay, before you read that, I'm going to give a little background. So what's going on is that by 1935 November, this is only 14 months before Srila Bhaktisiddhanta leaves this world. And already Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is becoming very, very concerned about the way the mission is going, because he started it in 1918 symbolically, or actually when he sat down in front of a picture of his Guru Maharaj, Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, accepted sannyas through that picture. If you're a ray of Vishnu, you can do that. And then that effectively began his mission. And then in the 1920s, it was just booming. So many people were coming. So many people were coming that Subhas Chandra Bose, the Indian nationalist firebrand, who was a classmate of Prabhupada's at Scottish Churches College, went to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and complained, I'm trying to kick the British out of India, and I'm recruiting an Indian National Army. That's my strategy, to get the British out of here. So, but you're attracting all these young men. So this is not very good. So Prabhupada told us, so to avoid the firebrand, the militant Subhas Chandra Bose, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta just said to him, I'm attracting Brahmins, Brahmin types, and they're very skinny men. You need stout and strong men, like these Sikhs and Gurkhas, So don't put your glance upon the men I'm recruiting. So in this way, Prabhupada said, Guru Maharaj avoided some big, protracted confrontation with Subhash Bose, and convinced Bose that, the kind of men he's attracting aren't really going to be much use to him to kick the British out of India. So, anyway, the heyday of the Gaudiya mission, the Gaudiya Math, the 20s, the 30s. But something happened in 1930. A benefactor of the Gaudiya Math, Jagabandhu, insisted on building a big palatial headquarters for the Gaudiya Math at Bagh Bazaar in Calcutta, a big marble palace. And as soon as that was built, not as soon maybe, but what happened, the effect of that was that, as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is telling Yangabai in that picture in the vase, we were very happy at Altadunga Junction. Our expenses were only 200 rupees for an entire month, for the rent and the boga and everything. And now, since we moved into this marble palace headquarters, my leading preachers, they're quarreling over who's going to get the nicest rooms in this palace, because there's some opulence there, and it was corrupting their desire and their mentality, their consciousness. So that's the mood, and he's very worried about what's going to happen, and he's confiding this to Abhay. So now Mataji can read.
Deeply concerned, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said to Abhay, Agun Jwalve, there will be fire. One day, there would be fire in the Calcutta Gaudiya Math, and that fire of party interests would spread and destroy.
Mm-hmm. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta could see, because he's Trikalagya, he can see past, present, and future. He can see what would become of his own mission. And then he said this.
Srila Bhaktisiddhanta then said directly to Abhay, Amar Ichha Chila Kichu Bhai Karana. I had a desire to print some books. If you ever get money, print books.
There's another seed. And here we can read this.
Standing by Radha Kunda and beholding his spiritual master, Abhay felt the words deeply enter his own life. If you ever get money, print books.
That was the seed of book production and book distribution, right there in Radha Kund in Kartik, 1935. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is not only foreseeing what's going to become of his own mission. There will be fire in the Mat. Agun Jvalbe. There will be fire in the Gaudiya Mat. And worse than a physical fire, the fire of dissension. will destroy from within. That's why Prabhupada would always tell us, nothing, you can only be destroyed from within. Nothing external can hurt ISKCON. Only if you fight and don't cooperate. So Prabhupada got that seed, and let's see here. Yes. So yeah, Srila Bhaktivedanta not only foresaw what was going to happen, but he could see, he's telling this confidentially to Abhayacharana Vrinda because he could see, here's a person who would be capable of reviving it, even if that does happen. Here's a person who's so serious and so sincere and so capable. If you ever get money, print books. Blessed by his Guru Maharaj, the founder Acharya of the Gaudiya Math, Prabhupada's desire to better serve his master's mission later moved him to write a letter to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. So that was November 35. December 36, Srila Prabhupada is still trying to make it in Bombay. It's still not happening, but he's determined. And he decides that because, he's a householder, he's doing business, and he from the get-go, he always wished he could be a little more inside, serving the mission. But now Srila Bhaktisiddhanta has already said to Bhakti Saranga Maharaj, you don't have to recommend him. It's better he's living a little outside, because he can already see what's going to happen inside. It's going to implode. There's going to be so much ugly fighting going on, even in the courts. So in December 1936, early December, Prabhupada told us that I wrote Guru Maharaj, and this is all he told us about what he wrote right here. Read that.
I am a householder. Sometimes I give monetary help while I cannot give you direct service. Is there any particular service I can do?
So more he told us about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's reply, because it was on the 13th or 14th December that he got a reply. He said Guru Maharaj was little indisposed. He was in Puri. Actually, he was preparing to leave this world, because now he made up his mind that he's done all he can. And these people are, they're losing the preaching spirit. And so he wrote a letter to his disciple. And we know it because Prabhupada told us excerpts. Here are the excerpts.
Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur replied, I am fully confident that you can explain in English our thoughts and arguments to the people. This will do much good to yourself as well as your audience.
And
I have every hope that you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher. And if you serve the mission to inculcate the novel impression of Lord Chaitanya's teachings in the people.
So, does that sound familiar? Next slide.
Abhay at once recognized this to be the same instruction he had received at their first meeting in 1922. He took it as a confirmation. There was no doubt as to the purpose of his life.
This final exchange shows why Srila Prabhupada received the most mercy from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. He was the most eager to fulfill his master's mission. In the next slide, we'll see how Srila Prabhupada responded to intense conflict, both within Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's fragmented Gaudiya mission and without, as World War II. Okay, so before we get into Back to Godhead, sure enough, Bhaktisiddhanta breathed his last at 5:30 a.m. on January 1st, 1937. Sometime, and you hear Prabhupada say on December 31st, but why you see both dates is because it was the winter time, and the Vaishnavas mark the beginning of a new calendar day from sunrise. So it wasn't sunrise yet at 5:30, And so he breathed his last. And before he breathed his last, within the last 24 hours, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had spoken his last will and testament. There was nothing written, but there was a brahmachari taking notes. And that's why we have a record of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's farewell address and wishes. And he told them to work cooperatively, form a GBC, and we have no desire but to serve the dust of the lotus feet of Sri Rupa Raghunath. Work conjointly, that was the word he used, means cooperatively. But soon after he passed, and almost immediately, there was fighting, because they were poised. There were two or three different camps. Who was going to control the Gaudiya Math? Who was going to be the next big person? But that's, as I think told you yesterday, that's not, you don't do that. When a founder Acharya leaves, you simply cooperate to serve his mission, and you continue the parampara, continue to initiate people. They didn't do that. Immediately they started fighting in the courts, and it became a disgrace. And it must have broken Prabhupada's heart. He was still trying to make it. He was still in Bombay in 36. He said, I gave a cry of grief when I heard the news. But he was fixed in the order of his Guru Maharaj, and it was determined to do what his Guru Maharaj said. Preach in the Western countries, English-speaking countries. This will be good for you, it'll be good for everyone. But he was still with the family at 39. Yeah, his last child was going to be Vrindavan Chandra Day, I mentioned yesterday, so that didn't come along until 39. But what happened was, it must have been shortly after that, Bombay letter and his Guru Maharaj passing away, that he decided to just go back to Calcutta and just maintain, because he wasn't able to, do much. There was a fire one time, there was a theft, and there was just plain old family incompetence that prevented Prabhupada from actually ever really making it big. So he moved his family back to Calcutta in the late 30s. And then shortly after that, actually, two of his godbrothers who had survived the breakup of the Gaudiya Math, who were determined to preach, Bhakti Saranga and Maharaj and Sridhar Maharaj, contacted him and said, we hear you're back in Calcutta, and we'd like to, even though we're in Navadvip, we'd like to preach in the big city, because Guru Maharaj always wanted us to preach where the people were. So can you find us some place? And so Prabhupada said, well, I have some extra rooms. I bought a place for my family, and a place where I can, also study downstairs, they're upstairs. I have some other rooms adjoining. Why don't you come and, you can just give a little donation just to cover utilities, something, electricity, and we can have some Sangha. So later on, Sridhar Maharaj told the Lilamrita team, who was gathering information for a lifetime preparation, that, whenever we'd come into Calcutta to preach from Navadvip, we noticed that Swami Maharaj, that's what they called him later after he took sannyas, he wasn't so much interested in business anymore. He just wanted to talk the Bhagavat Katha. He wanted to have some Katha, Shastra Katha. And so they did. They had nice Katha over the Bhagavatam. And then in 1939, Prabhupada showed them what he had started to write. He'd started to write his own, it was called Introduction to Gita-Upanishad. It was actually an early draft of what we know as the introduction to Prabhupada's Gita as it is. It was called Introduction to Gita-Upanishad. And I think it was later he was serializing that or printing it in Back to Godhead. And so they were very impressed with Prabhupada's writing. And they said, Abai Babu, you're a very favored son of Guru Maharaj. You're blessed by him. And you're expert in English writing and preaching. we're going to award you a title, as was the way of awarding titles to expert devotees, advanced devotees. So they gave him the title Bhaktivedanta. That's where Bhaktivedanta comes from. It was the title that was awarded by his advanced God brothers. And so he became Bhaktivedanta Prabhu at that point. And then in 1944, with the war still going on, and Subhas Chandra Bose had made an arrangement with Hitler that, when you capture the Indian soldiers who are compelled to fight for the British, don't just put them in prison camps, send them to me. And then we're going to fight the British over here on this side. I'm teaming up with the Japanese, who were at some point bombing Calcutta, and we're going to fight the British from this side. So Hitler liked that, and he did that. He sent somehow he got the soldiers to Subhas Chandra Bose. So in the middle of all this, on Vyasa Puja Day, what you're looking at is a masthead. That wasn't there in the beginning. You're looking at October 20th, 1958 issue. Prabhupada actually, after BTG had been going a while, he enlisted the help of some designer. He paid some designer to make a design. I think it was actually Prabhupada's concept, but the designer executed it. And there is Mahaprabhu in the left corner, and there is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, the inspirer of BTG, in the lower right corner. And back again, there's there's the people in darkness, and they're looking at Mahaprabhu in the light. Godhead is light, nescience is darkness. Where there is Godhead, there is no nescience. Of course, that's a paraphrase of Tamasima Jyotirgama. Don't stay in darkness, come into the light. So on his Guru Maharaj's Vyasa Puja Day in 1944, in February, he launched Back to Godhead. And very interesting articles. Prabhupada was providing spiritual solutions for impossible material problems, because there's no material solution for material problems. You have to go to the root. Every material problem has a spiritual cause, actually. It's all caused from our causeless unwillingness to surrender to the Lord. So let's let Mataji read this.
In 1944, while working and living with his family in Calcutta, Srila Prabhupada started Back to Godhead magazine in English.
Launched near the end of World War II, Srila Prabhupada's BTG offered the war-weary world spiritual solutions to material problems. Now, after the war, with India's independence from Britain imminent, Srila Prabhupada thought of engaging India's hero, Mahatma Gandhi, in Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's mission. Okay, so, Gandhi was Prabhupada's hero as a young man before he met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, because he thought it was correct what Gandhi was saying, that before we can really come into our own, we have to get the British out of India. So non-cooperation, non-violence, that's the way to Swaraj. And then, so Prabhupada was hatching this strategy that no one knows me. Guru Maharaj wants me to spread Krishna consciousness in English all over the world. Okay, but no one knows me. But everyone knows Gandhi. They revere Gandhi. Gandhi captured the public imagination with his non-cooperation, non-violence. And Gandhi says his book of inspiration is the Gita, but I know he doesn't really know the Gita. Really, he just, Gandhi, he thought that the Pandavas were even a metaphor for the five senses, and Kurukshetras, a metaphor for the battlefield of life, the Kurukshetra war. He didn't even really believe that historically that Krishna actually appeared in this world. So Prabhupada thought that if he could just engage Gandhi, and Prabhupada actually told us to a reporter in 1976 on the occasion of the first New York Ratha Yatra, By then, the Indian diaspora was going all over the world, and there were a lot of Indians by then in America. So before the Ratha Yatra, Prabhupada was interviewed by an Indian interviewer from a publication called Trans India magazine. And Prabhupada told the reporter, he said, yes, I wanted to start this movement from India. I even requested Mahatma Gandhi that Mahatma Ji, you have got some respect all over the world, and you are known as a great student of Bhagavad Gita. Now you have got your Swaraj. The Britishers have gone away. Let us preach Bhagavad Gita as it is. And then Prabhupada said, my letter might have reached him or not reached him. But then he was killed. So Prabhupada wanted to engage Gandhi, and then by fate, as fate would have it, Gandhi was assassinated in January 48. Prabhupada had actually written him 6 months earlier in July 47, just before the official Swaraj came in August 47. And Prabhupada wrote him a letter. And here's an excerpt. I am your unknown friend. You should therefore take a note of warning from your insignificant friend like me that unless you retire timely from politics and engage yourself 100% in the preaching work of Bhagavad Gita, which is the real function of the Mahatmas, because in Gita, Krishna tells what a real Mahatma is, always chanting my glories. So unless you actually become a real Mahatma, you shall have to meet with such inglorious deaths as Mussolini, Hitler, Tojo. So he says, I only request you to retire from politics, at least for a month only, and let us have some discussion on Bhagavad Gita. I am sure thereby that you shall get a new light from the result of such discussions, not only for your benefit, but for the benefit of the world at large, as I know that you are sincere, honest, and moralist. So that was July 47, and then as fate would have it, on January 30th, 1948, just after one of Gandhi's prayer meetings, because Gandhi was famous, he would have these prayer meetings, right? And Bhagavad Gita, he would invoke Bhagavad Gita, and he would have some chanting. Right after one of the prayer meetings, a Hindu extremist who thought that Gandhi was being too soft on Muslims, because Gandhi's vision was for a unified India. But there was a Hindu extremist who thought that Gandhi was being too friendly with Muslims. Naturam Godse approached him, bang, bang, and shot him dead. And there is Gandhi's, at the wake, at the vision of Gandhi later. So there must have been a shock on some level to Prabhupada that his boyhood hero had been shot. But then quickly, what did Prabhupada do? He had approached Gandhi with a letter, and Prabhupada said, he may have seen it or maybe not. So many secretaries and guards, who know if he even read the letter. So immediately, Prabhupada starts writing to people who want to have a memorial for Gandhi, government people, because they know Gandhi is like a national treasure, and the whole world reveres Gandhi. So how are they going to honor him? So Prabhupada wrote that, and instead of trying to honor Gandhi, with a big statue or a big building or whatever, where pigeons will just pass stool on his statue, Prabhupada was very blunt. He said, you should look, Gandhi's favorite book was the Gita. He said that was his book of inspiration. Well, I can show you, Prabhupada said, how to make a whole community based on the teachings of the Gita to really honor Gandhi's memory. And this community will be a beacon of light for the world. I mean, even today, I don't know if it's still going, but they have this, I forget what it's called now. It was inspired by Tagore. So they have this, I forget the name. Maybe when we do Q&A, you can remind me of the name. It's down in Pondicherry, the French used to be in Pondicherry. So Prabhupada said, we can make a community to inspire the whole world of how to live the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada said here that there's a Gandhi Memorial Fund, So if you really want to honor Gandhi's memory, don't just build huge buildings, or Prabhupada said, dead stone statues, as we see the general tendency. Mahatma Gandhi was a saintly reformer, and his memorial fund may be utilized for the purpose of converting degraded persons into saints. So that was Prabhupada. He wanted to convert the whole world into Krishna consciousness. He wanted to start in India. And he was calling this community, by the way, Gita Nagari. That was the first kind of face Prabhupada put on his mission. Even before the League of Devotees, he was talking about this community, this Gandhi-based or Gita-based community, Gita Nagari. And that was the first face that he put on his mission to revive the Gaudiya mission. So predictably, government leaders and business leaders, all these people were Prabhupada were writing to, they ignored him, or they politely said, thank you for your letter, and I'm sorry I cannot help you with this, but good luck. So when India's leaders ignored Prabhupada's proposals to fund a spiritual community based on Gandhi's inspirational scripture, Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada decided to turn his attention back to BTG, which he had actually circumstantially neglected. So he said, okay, they're not going to listen to me. I'm going to preach anyway. And I'll make this magazine, where he began to further articulate his plan to rescue humanity by building spiritual communities based on the Gita's teachings. So if you look at old BTGs, and some of them still exist, some of them are also in the British Museum, that you see Prabhupada has got this Gita Nagari scheme to re-spiritualize humanity. In the next lesson, we'll take a closer look at Srila Prabhupada's Gita Nagari plan. Okay, that doesn't apply to us because that's lesson 5, which we're not going to have time to do. But he did try to use Gandhi's name to promote his Gita Nagari mission. And years later, he actually even adopted some of Gandhi's strategies to unfold his ISKCON mission. Now, a few years after Gandhi's demise in 1948, Srila Prabhupada met the first students to take an interest in his preaching. So Prabhupada was traveling, and he was kind of like in Vanaprastha mode by this time. And he teamed up with a doctor in a little city in UP, little town called Jhansi. And because the doctor was prescribing medicines for his patients, and then right next to him, in the next table next to him, there was Bhaktivedanta Prabhu selling the medicines. So the doctor couldn't help but notice that while Bhaktivedanta Prabhu was selling his patients the medicines, the pharmaceuticals, that he was preaching to them about the real medicine for the soul. Because Bhaktivedanta Prabhu was not only a pharmaceutical pharmacist, but he was a doctor of the soul. He was a spiritual doctor. And so after their 2-week stint teaming up, then the doctor turned to Bhaktivedanta Prabhu and said, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you know, I could see that you're not just a pharmacist, but you're a preacher. And I'll tell you something. This town, Jhansi, there's an Ayurvedic medical college. And I think a lot of these students who are interested not only in Ayurveda, but in a lot of things Vedic, they would be open to hearing from you. So it's just, just a suggestion that you come back sometime and you try to get something going with these students. So Prabhupada took that seriously. So when he came back to Jhansi in October 1952, he actually did go visit the college, and he interested one student. His name was Prabhakar Mishra, and he became Acharya Prabhupada. He actually initiated this person. And this person actually was living in this property called Radha Memorial. There was this place where, much like the person who built the Taj Mahal, had built that it was a Muslim, had built that as a memorial for his wife, the Taj Mahal, the tomb. And so many years earlier, and it was now in the hands of some estate executor, there was somebody still minding the estate, still minding the properties, and it was called the Radha Memorial. And Prabhakar Mishra, the student, before he had met Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, had been living there, just on the property, because he was a something of a Sanskritist, and a spiritually minded person. And the executor of the estate, he liked spiritually minded persons. He liked sadhus. So when he met Prabhupada, Acharya Prabhakar Mishra, he said, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you know, your preaching is very inspiring. You know a lot about Ayurveda, you know a lot about Veda. And so I'm going to show you where if you think you'd like to stay in Jhansi, I'm going to introduce you to the executor of this estate, and I think he would let you stay for free at this place. And it's a very nice facility, Radha Memorial. It's a nice part of Jhansi. There's a lot of trees and nice buildings, very nice, because this person who built this for his wife, this memorial, really built a whole estate. So sure enough, he introduced Prabhupada to this executor, and the executor said, yeah, why don't you just stay here? And I can see you have a spiritual mission. So with the estate executor's permission, Prabhupada transformed the property into the League of Devotees. So you see the pictures perhaps on the Lilamrita. There's this big, the executor let him put this on the walls, League of Devotees. And Prabhupada was canvassing for his mission amongst the students at this college. And he even put an ad in there. They had a little publication. And the ad read like this: wanted. Let's see. Yeah, wanted. Candidates from any nationality to qualify themselves as real Brahmins for preaching the teachings of Bhagavad Gita for all practical purposes throughout the whole world. Deserving candidates will be provided with free boarding and lodging. Apply, A.C. Bhaktivedanta, founder and secretary of the League of Devotees. So years later, Harishari Prabhu, who was traveling with Prabhupada as his servant, found some of these old League of Devotees flyers like this in Prabhupada's rooms in Radha Damodar, and just some old personal effects. And Harishari said he went to Prabhupada with one of these old handbills and said, oh, Prabhupada, you had something before ISKCON in India? What is this, League of Devotees? Applied Jhansi, P.O. Jhansi, U.P. What was the League of Devotees? And he said, Prabhupada laughed. Oh, that was just me, just one person. But I was trying to start something. I was trying to start my mission. So that was the second face Prabhupada put on his mission, League of Devotees. Nobody listened to him for Gita Nagari scheme, although of course later on Prabhupada renamed the New York farm. First it became New Varshana, and then later on it became Gita Nagari. So Prabhupada laughed. It was just me. But he was really trying to start something. So in the next slide, we'll see, there's Prabhupada in, let's see, this is May 16th, 1953. He's officially launching the League of Devotees at, I'm not sure where he held it? I guess he held it on the property. I'm not sure exactly where he held this, but he officially launched the League of Devotees. And it was on, I think it was on, no, it was in May, okay, May 16th. So he had it must have been some auspicious day. And he held a grand opening. This is from the Lilamrita. He held a grand opening celebration for the League of Devotees with continuous readings, kirtan, and prasadam distribution. From early morning until night, it was an all-day affair. Prabhupada just went all out to try to attract people to participate in and support the League of Devotees. The buildings were decorated with leaves, flowers, and many earth and water pots. In the evening, when attendance was greatest, Abai lectured from the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita on Raja Guhya Yoga. We know it now as the most confidential knowledge. Prabhakar Mishra conducted a fire sacrifice, and several Brahmins chanted mantras from Brahma Sangita. Guests received a 16-page prospectus containing Abai's essay on the need for the League and an excerpt from the charter explaining its goals. It was signed Om Tat Sat Abhoy Charnaravindo, Bhaktivedanta founder and secretary. So here's Mataji is going to read a little excerpt from the prospectus of the League.
To propagate spiritual knowledge systematically for checking the imbalance of life to the whole race of India and the world over, with a view to educate the people in general in the techniques of spiritual life.
So lo and behold, if you're familiar with the 7 purposes of ISKCON, this is a rough draft. This is the first draft of what became the 7 purposes of ISKCON. This is the first purpose of the League. So you can see, even though the Gaudiya Math had fragmented, even though Prabhupada is just doing business, trying to support his family, he's launched back to Godhead, and he's working out the blueprint for a worldwide mission, while nobody's listening to him. There's a whole chapter in the Lilamrita. It's called Crying Alone in the Wilderness. That's what Prabhupada, how he characterized himself trying to preach in India. Nobody would, give him one of their sons to help him, but he did initiate the first disciple, Acharya Prabhakar. That was something. So, what happened to this? Well, what happened was the League's land and buildings, originally a gift promise. Yeah, this estate executor, he was even hinting that maybe I can gift you this, because nobody's buying nobody's buying this place. Maybe I can just give it to you. But what happened was, ironically, one of Prabhupada's listeners at the Ayurvedic Medical College was a lady who was also involved with another organization called the Mahila Samhita Sangha. And this was an initiative by the wife of the governor of UP. Her name was Lilavati Munshi. The governor of UP was, I forget his name, but he was K. Munshi. K, I don't know his first name, but K. Munshi. And he was the governor of UP. And his wife was a real activist to help the ladies in India. And still to this day in India, it's a big plight, abuse of women, violence, sexual violence against women, and forced, sati ritual and all this stuff, even though it's illegal. So Lilavati Munshi heard from this lady who was hearing this sadhu preach, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu at the Radha Memorial, League of Devotees, that there's this facility here in Jhansi, and I think it would make a very nice facility to have a chapter here of the Mahila Samhita Sangha. So it's a ladies' upliftment society. And so what happened was Lilavati Munshi, she put pressure on the estate executor to sell to her, to have a nice chapter base for a chapter in Jhansi. And she actually put political pressure on him because she's the wife of the governor, right? So she said, if you don't sell to us, it's going to be very hard for you to renew your business license. This man, this state executor, the way he was making his money was he had a couple of movie theaters, cinema houses in town. So she hinted that if you don't sell to us, you're not going to be able to renew your license, and there goes your income. So he became scared. So supported by the governor's wife, the group put political pressure on the estate's executor to sell them or lose his business license. And then Lilavati Munshi actually wrote Prabhupada, and she asked him to vacate the premises. You're trying to do this League of Devotees, but nothing's really happening. So please vacate the premises so we can take it over. And in the meantime, the executor is saying to Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, I'd like to just gift you this property, but I really can't do that. I'm being pressured to sell to them. And here's the sale price. So he quoted some figure that was way beyond Prabhupada's means. So, so what Prabhupada did was, he said, okay, this is the sale price. This is what's in front of me. I'm going to go back to Calcutta for a while. And I know how to make money through pharmaceuticals, maybe not on the scale of Birla. You know, I can't be another Birla. That somehow isn't happening. But I'm going to crank up my pharmaceutical works in Calcutta, and I'll get these rupees, you know, the sale price. So Prabhupada goes home to Calcutta for a bit in 54. And here it is. Here's the fateful T or B thing. So during his Jhansi years, on a trip home to Calcutta to raise funds for the League, an incident involving Prabhupada and his wife spelled the end of his householder life. Here's Prabhupada's account. So here's what Prabhupada told us. This is the transcript from the quote. Quote, I wanted as much as possible to get her to work with me in spreading Krishna consciousness. Her meaning Radharani Day, his wife. To get her to help, but she was very determined. She would not help me spread Krishna consciousness. And she was very attached to drinking tea. So the same BBT artists who produced the paintings for Prabhupada's books after Prabhupada left, they were still in LA. So the Lilamrita was a BBT produced book. It was commissioned by the GBC in March 78. So then Satsur Maharaj gathered a team of devotees. I was lucky enough to be part of that team, for at least for the first 2 volumes. And the archives, what became the archives, it wasn't officially the archives yet, they were feeding us material. And then the BBT artists were painting these nice paintings. So there's the dramatic time. And so Prabhupada says, and she was very attached to drinking tea. I was always telling her not to drink tea because I wanted to have a nice Vaishnava family. But, you know, the British or the Indians were getting hooked on this caffeine British tea, chai, and that's still to this day. You take a train, chai, you know. So although I was repeatedly telling her, this time I finally said, so you have to choose between me or tea. Either the tea goes or I go. Now, this is 1954. Prabhupada has been in this Grihastha ashram 36 years. They're not interested in the mission. And even in the 40s, Prabhupada had an opportunity to get a big building to build up his business at dirt cheap price. But they wouldn't cooperate. They wouldn't let their best servant go from Calcutta. This was an opportunity in Kanpur. They wouldn't cooperate. I mean, it would have been in their best interest, even materially, but they didn't cooperate. So either the tea goes or I go. There it is up the top. So she replied, well, give up tea drinking or give up my husband? Well, I will have to give up my husband then. And then Prabhupada said, of course, she thought I was joking. And here's some more words right here, Mataji.
While Abhay was out, his wife took his worshipable Bhagavatam to the market and traded it for tea biscuits. At first, he felt depressed, but then a wave of absolute resolution passed over him. His family life was finished.
Very dramatic. Yeah. I mean, you know, the system is you take something of weight, of value, and you put it on the scale, and they'll give you an equal weight of what you want. That was one way to do business at the market. So of all things she could have chosen, she chose to take Prabhupada's Bhagavatam to the market. That was a real statement. I mean, her whole life, she had been resisting having home programs. Whenever Prabhupada had a home program, she just went with the children in the back room. She would have no part of it. And Prabhupada said she was a nice, pious lady, but she wanted no part of any preaching mission. She didn't want to be a missionary's wife. So she just took the kids in the back and, avoided the whole thing. So here it was. Prabhupada is giving her an ultimatum. And so what's her pushback kind of counterpunch response? She takes his Bhagavatam to the market, trades it for tea biscuits. That was the last straw. So what did Prabhupada do? Turned on his heels, walked out. They never saw him again. But they didn't think that. Oh, he's always coming and going. He'll be back. They never saw him again. Even Prabhupada said one of my daughters wasn't married. I had tried to arrange a marriage for my youngest daughter, but they didn't accept it. So I thought, when this happened, God will take care. Enough is enough. So as we say, he was out of there. He never looked back. Where did he go immediately? Well, let's see here. He actually went down to South Calcutta, where the godbrother of his had a mutt. His name was Paramhans Maharaj. And he swore, this is what he told us, the interviewers for the Lamrita biography research team. He said, oh yes, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, or Swami Maharaj later by the time of the interview, he came down to my mutt. And for 2 weeks, he was doing nothing but pacing the mutt. And at the top of his voice, he was chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada was releasing 36 years of that Grihastha ashram, just getting it out. He was done. He was really on his own now. So with his family life behind him, Prabhupada was now free to develop his mission. But what happened was he went back to Jhansi, actually, and he didn't have any money. But he was being advised by people who liked him, attorneys too, that, you know, India has such a long, deep tradition of favoring sadhus. You were here first. Possession is 90% of ownership. So we can help you fight this. Prabhupada wasn't sure what to do. So he did something very exemplary. And this, we should take note of this. When we're not sure, when we're really not sure what to do, we should consult. So he consulted a trusted godbrother, Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, who later became a sannyas guru. And he said, Maharaj, can you come from Mathura? He must have written him. Just come here, maybe bring a brahmachari or two, assistant. And you survey the scene and you give me your frank opinion. This is I actually have a preaching platform here. People are hearing me. Now the governor's wife's putting pressure on the executor to sell to her. But I've been here for a while. So tell me what to do. So Keshav Maharaj came. And after a few days, he said, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you know, Guru Maharaj, he likes us to be in these big cities, as hellish as they are. That's where the people are. That's where the people are. It's the only reason why we're in these cities. This Jhansi, it's small. We say a backwater. It's a little, or one-horse town. It's small. You're not now in Vanaprastha to engage in litigation over a place like this. So just drop it. I know Mahaprabhu has big plans for you. You're an expert preacher. So for now, just drop it. Come with me to Mathura and we'll see. We'll see. So Prabhupada did that. He followed Keshav Maharaj's advice. But now he had no money. He had no business. So with family life behind him, Prabhupada was now free to develop his mission. After he dropped Jhansi, he tried to revive BTG in Delhi, but found little interest in spiritual revolution among his materially ambitious countrymen. But somehow or other, Prabhupada produced 12 issues of Back to Godhead in 1956. And in these issues, you read, he's articulating his mission. He's talking all about how he's going to do his mission. He's open. It's like an open thing. But they weren't really interested, if you see in the other in the Leelamrita, there's that painting of Prabhupada going to the tea stalls in Delhi, and they're just got their turbans on, and they're just politely refusing him. And yeah. So living in near poverty, Prabhupada had little choice but to try to work with his godbrothers in the mutts of the fragmented Gaudiya mission. Since Srila Prabhupada's householder days, Srila Bhaktivedanta had been coming to him in dreams, inviting him to take sannyas and increase his preaching. But when he approached some sannyasi godbrothers about awarding him sannyas, the response was cool. What they would say was, well, we'll think about that, but why don't you help us with our mutt? And Prabhupada tried. But he was so expansive in his mood of like one mutt had some kind of newsletter or some kind of publication. So Prabhupada said, I know how to double the size of this publication and get it printed for half the price. So that's Prabhupada. He was always he was enterprising, and he was a preacher. But they would always let him go. They'd always give him what we call a pink slip. And they wrote him a letter one time, one of the mutts. You are a favored son of our Guru Maharaj. You're too much for us. Better you preach on your own. So they couldn't handle him until Prabhupada told Keshav Maharaj about how his Guru Maharaj again is coming to him in dreams, take sannyas. So Keshav Maharaj said, yes, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you must do it. You must take sannyas. So there is the picture, September 17, 1959, accepting sannyas. It was a media event. I don't know if Prabhupada, I wouldn't doubt if Prabhupada was the one that called the paper, and because he's on the right. He became A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Abhayachara Aravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami. And on the left, there's a person who is at least 90, and he became Bhaktivedanta Muni Maharaj. So Muni Maharaj, he didn't last much longer than that picture. He was taking sannyas to kind of leave this world. Bhaktivedanta Swami is taking sannyas to go into the world. This is another rite of passage. He's taking sannyas to become full-on dedicated preacher, even though he has no support, no money. That didn't deter him. He just had his purity of purpose. Purity is the force. So now, this is in 1959. Now, 9 years later, in 1968, in Seattle, Prabhupada was preaching, and he was, I think it was the end of a Gita class. Anyway, it was October 68 in Seattle, and Prabhupada gets word that his sannyas guru had passed away. Somehow they got a telegram or something, because he was Bhakti Pragya Maharaj's illustrious sannyas disciple who had gone and done what no one ever done, gone to the West and started making devotees. So he got word, and then Prabhupada, if you hear the whole tape, it's very moving. Prabhupada's giving a whole talk about his Guru Maharaj. And then he has all the devotees come up and sign a letter of condolence that he's going to send off to Mathura. And then you hear Prabhupada at the end of it sign, because when Prabhupada signed his name, that famous big A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, it was a continuous A and C and Bhaktivedanta. You never hear Prabhupada, when he signed his name, he would always sign his name with one continuous stroke. So at the end of having the devotees sign, then you hear Prabhupada's signature. Now, during that talk, it was very moving. Prabhupada's very emotional. And we're going to hear now. Whoops, okay. So let me go back. And Prabhupada is speaking very gravely, emotionally to the devotees about his Guru, his sannyas guru, and also about his own Guru Maharaj. And you're going to hear Prabhupada say things that he would not normally say, that are not even the philosophy in one sense. So I'll just let Prabhupada speak.
I was sitting alone in Vrindavan, writing my god brother, he insisted me, yeah, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu. Not he insisted me, practically my spiritual master insisted me through him that you accept. Because without accepting the renounced order of life, nobody can become a preacher. So unwillingly I accepted.
So why did Prabhupada say that? He wanted to take sannyas. Unwillingly I accepted. Because he wanted to glorify his Guru Maharaj and his sannyas Guru Maharaj. And he also said nobody can become a preacher unless they take the renounced order of life. That's not what Prabhupada always preached. He preached what Bhaktivedanta preached. Grihe tako vane tako. Whatever you are, you can preach. Sadahari bhole tako. But he wanted to glorify them. So again, we always have to know context of why Prabhupada's saying what he's saying. This is an ecstasy of Prabhupada's. So he takes sannyas, and then he's still doing BTG, but then he meets two friends who say, Swami Maharaj, he's Bhaktivedanta Swami now, you know, you've been trying to do this BTG, but people, they easily throw away magazines. Why don't you write books? People don't so easily discard books. That would be more lasting. One was an army captain, and one was a librarian. And when the second person said it, Prabhupada thought, I think Guru Maharaj is trying to tell me something. And then perhaps he remembered that before Srila Bhaktisiddhanta let those Gaudiya Math preachers go to Europe, go to London and go to, I think it was in Bonn, or no, Berlin, I'm not sure. Anyway, one of those places. I think it was Bonn, actually. That he insisted they have a book. And so it was Sri Krishna Chaitanya, that book that Professor Sanyal had written, and then Bhaktisiddhanta had scrupulously edited the book, volume 1 of a projected trilogy. So Prabhupada hit on his idea. I need books too. I need to do something of sufficient gravity and weight. And so he hit on the idea of giving his own commentary on Bhagavatam. And that became his magnum opus, his great work, which when he came to the West, he was writing at night when we were asleep. So before he did that, he actually did produce another book, Easy Journey to Other Planets, which he serialized in Back to Godhead. And then he started writing the Bhagavatam. He began his English translation with elaborate commentary on the Bhagavatam, the cream of Vedic literature. And then he started this in Delhi at the Chippiwada temple. And then on a visit, so he was writing in Delhi, and then he was going to Vrindavan for inspiration. And he was visiting the Radha Damodar temple, famous with the 64 samadhis and the Radha Damodar deities established by Srila Jiva Goswami. And then Gorachand Goswami, who was the mahant there at the time, said, "You're writing the Bhagavatam? You're doing Tika on Bhagavatam? Why don't you? Then you should live in Vrindavan. You should live here and go print there." So Prabhupada took him up on it. He negotiated, because Gorachand said, "Look, if you renovate these rooms, there's a few rooms here that are a little run down, but if you raise enough funds to renovate them, then you can have them for a nominal, I think Prabhupada later negotiated 5 rupees a month or something, a price to just keep them." So Prabhupada somehow was able to raise 5,000 rupees, which was no small sum in those days, to renovate the rooms, which became his, those rooms that he has still, and ISKCON is maintaining them. And then he was writing in Vrindavan and going to Delhi to print. So Yes, taking inspiration from his Guru Maharaj and the six Goswamis, Prabhupada began preparing the spiritual literature he would take with him to preach in the West. And so he produced volume 1 in 62, volume 2 in 63, volume 3 in 64. And then in 64, after those 3 brick-colored Indian Bhagavatams were produced, he gifted, before we go to that slide, we're going to, and this is the kind of, this isn't exactly the typewriter, but it was a typewriter like this, an old Corona manual where there's no question of touch typing because you have to mash your finger on the keys, to get the typewriter to make an impression on the paper. So that little image that this nice devotee did to make a nice image was after Prabhupada had produced the 3 volumes, and before he went and got on the Jaladuta and left from Calcutta, he did a little press release, that here's a Swami is going to the West to deliver India's message of peace and goodwill. And they had the photographer came, and then it was a big write-up in the paper in Calcutta, Amrita Bazar Patrika. So what we're going to show you is a little excerpt from a preface from those old Indian Bhagavatams. And Prabhupada's begging the reader to overlook because he's writing for Westerners, so he's begging the reader to overlook his Indian English, even though he knows good English, but it's kind of Indian English. So Mataji's going to read.
Our capacity of presenting the matter in adequate language, especially a foreign language, will certainly fail, and there may be so many literary discrepancies in spite of our honest attempt to present it in the proper way. But we are sure that with our all faults in this connection.
Now, did you hear Mataji hesitate? Because there is Prabhupada is doing Indian English. With our all faults. We say with all our faults, right? So right in the plea, there's the Indian English and the seriousness.
The seriousness of the subject matter will be taken into consideration, and the leaders of the society will still accept this on account of its being an honest attempt for glorifying the Almighty Great, so much now badly needed.
Yes, and Prabhupada gave the example, look, if you're in a movie theater and there's a fire and you don't speak the language of the people, still somehow or other, you can make yourself understood. If you're the one to spot the fire, you can make yourself understood. So Prabhupada's begging the reader, look, just overlook my imperfect English and just try to study the spiritual techniques that I'm going to teach you of how to transcend birth and death and how the whole world can come out of this illusion of that we're the body. And there's Prabhupada at the government house in Delhi and gifting Shastri, Lal Bahadur Shastri. When Nehru passed away, then Shastri was the prime minister. And he's very happy to get gifted because he was actually a Shastri. He was very good with Shastra. Now, in 65, that was in 64, 65, Prabhupada finally got his sponsorship. And he was able to get a visa and he was able to get P-form. If you read the Lilamrita, all these hurdles, all these hoops Prabhupada had to jump through. And then, much later in 1976, Prabhupada was reflecting on how before he came to America, he was dreaming of coming to America. He'd never been out of India. And so here's a morning walk, 76 in Mayapur, and Prabhupada's telling the devotees on the walk how he was dreaming of coming to America.
I planned that I must go to America. Generally they go to London. I did not go to London. I was simply dreaming how to go to New York. I was dreaming whether I shall go this way through Tokyo, Japan, or that way which was cheaper. And I was targeting to New York, always. Sometimes I was dreaming that I come to New York.
Resoluted purpose. Aim is one. Prabhupada was up to date, whereas Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in the 30s had sent his preachers to London. Prabhupada knew that the energy had moved to New York. That was where it was happening. So that's why he was being guided by Krishna to go all the way to New York. And we know it was very arduous. He had a couple of heart attacks. And with great difficulty, once he got that sponsorship for 3 weeks only from Gopal Agarwal, he still didn't have a way to get there. So he begged Subhati Morarji. When Prabhupada was trying to do business in the 30s in Bombay, he met Subhati Morarji. And even he saw the land in Juhu back in the 30s, he told us later. And he thought, oh, this would be a great place for a temple. That's how a devotee thinks, right? So, and she had hosted him sometimes. He used to have, I think it was through Acharya Prabhakar, might have introduced him to Subhati Morarji. And he used to hold Shastra classes in Bombay when they launched the Bombay Gaudiya Math. So she knew Prabhupada from the 30s. So he went back to her now that he was in his ripe old age and he was trying to do his mission. And of course, if you read the Lilamrita, you know the story. She didn't want to give him passage. She said, look, Swamiji, all my secretaries, they say you're going to die. You're an old man. You won't even last. You won't even make it on the ship. And she was practically right. He almost didn't make it out of the Red Sea. So he finally convinced her. No, don't worry. Krishna will save me. And that's what happened. So the way I end this lesson is I have a god sister named Yamini. It was a musician. And unfortunately, she passed away a couple of years ago, but she wrote a beautiful song begging the Atlantic Ocean to let Prabhupada come, because the Atlantic is a very ferocious ocean. It's much more ferocious than the Pacific. I mean, Prabhupada almost didn't make it out of the Indian Ocean or the Red Sea. The Red Sea is actually where he has had his heart attacks. But then the Atlantic is like super ferocious. So, it's a music video. It's about 3-4 minutes. And then we're going to take questions. Finally, I just can't resist telling these stories to illustrate the points. But it's a very nice music video. And then I'll read the lesson outcomes, which you'll try to ask your questions based on the lesson outcomes and also anything you saw on the slides. And here we go with the video. Her name was Joy Fry. That was her English name, and she became Yamini Devi Dasi. We always called her Jamini in New Vrindavan because that's how Prabhupada said wise, like Yadurani was Jadurani. So Yamini was Jamini. But here's Mother Jamini singing her beautiful song, O Atlantic.
Prabhupada boarded the Jala Duta today. He's heading to the west without delay. His books are in their trunks just like gold. He carries a message true and bold. His teacher wanted Prabhupada to go to the places where people did not know.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
So, lesson outcomes. By the end of the lesson, students will be able to identify the seeding and sprouting of Prabhupada's mission's creeper. Recount 3 major blessings Prabhupada received from Srila Bhaktivedanta in 1935. Recount early manifestations of Prabhupada's mission in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And describe Prabhupada's sea voyage to the West. So now Ananda Gauranga Prabhu is going to invite you to ask questions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So that was a dramatic video, very touching and moving. Thank you for this fascinating tape, part 2 of this 3-part seminar, Prabhu. So we'd like also to thank all the devotees who joined us from USA and different parts of Canada, Toronto, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Vancouver, etc., who joined us through Zoom and Facebook as well. And special thanks to the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. We were able to recognize Krishnadas Prabhu and Purnamasi Mother. Please forgive me if I'm missing other names of disciples. So on that note, Prabhu, we would, Krishnadas Kaviraj Prabhu has a question. So we would like to unmute him so that he can ask the question directly
I
to
think
you.
I
Is
am
that okay, Prabhu?
unmuted.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. Go ahead, Prabhu.
I just want to say thank you so much, Suresvara Prabhu. It's a real honor to be your godbrother. And, you know, this dramatic presentation that you gave just brings us so close to Prabhupada. One of the things that I noted during the talk was that you talked about Prabhupada helping the Gaudiya Math so much. And I just wanted you to, if you could speak a little bit to how the devotees should show proper etiquette to members of the Gaudiya Math now. You know, and we sort of see ourselves as being very different, but we can see that our roots are the same and everything. So if you could just speak a little bit to how we should show proper etiquette to them, I think it might be helpful for everyone. Thank you. And thank you so much again.
Thank you, Krishnadas. I wish I was right there with you. And you're in Scarborough?
In Toronto.
Toronto.
I mean, in Lindsay, Ontario.
Lindsay. Okay. With you and Purnamasi. Okay. Yeah, well, it's an honor for me to be your godbrother. Staunch deputy. So, good question, because, you know, the last thing Prabhupada did, the last entity that Prabhupada created before he passed away from this world was the Bhaktivedanta Swami Charity Trust. And that was an organization to help all the Gaudiya groups unite. And because of Prabhupada's potency, you know, ISKCON had all the assets. We had so many assets. But Prabhupada didn't want to just, he wasn't sectarian. He didn't want to hoard the assets for ISKCON. He never stopped trying to unite all the Gaudiya groups. As we showed yesterday, when he came to America, he was trying to get his godbrothers to cooperate to help him. So the last thing he did, even after there was practically no cooperation, and only a few godbrothers actually, you know, acknowledged him for what he had done, that he was the one who actually did what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wanted them all to do. Prabhupada magnanimously created this charity trust to help repair, you know, buildings that were running down, Gaudiya Mats, and even other. It was just trying to unite all the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So how do we relate? Well, I mean, I asked the same question actually to Hari Shari Prabhu, who had a lot of association with Prabhupada in this connection. Prabhupada somehow with Hari Shari, Prabhupada liked to open up and talk about the old days in India before coming to America. So I asked Harishari Prabhu this, and he said, because Harishari, if you may know, started this Bhaktivedanta Research Center. The seed of that idea in Calcutta, an idea of a place where scholars could come and research not only Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but all Vaishnavism, but especially with the accent in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So it was with the cooperation of some people affiliated with what had been the Gaudiya Math, that Harishari Prabhu and the Bhaktivedanta Research Center got a treasure trove of writings from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. They got so original diaries and manuscripts and biographies and commentaries and stuff from Mahaprabhu's time. And it's like the biggest find to this date that they have. So that was an example of people favorable to ISKCON who knew that the best place to deposit, I think it was from the collection of Sundarananda Vidya Vinod, connected with the Gaudiya Math, who gave all this material. So basically, I mean, in a nutshell, in a few words, we invite cooperation with Gaudiya Maths who appreciate Prabhupada's unparalleled contribution. I mean, even in Prabhupada's last days, there was a meeting. Prabhupada said to the late, great Bhakti Taru Maharaj, call on my godbrothers. I must apologize to them. Because to protect ISKCON, Prabhupada had to say and put into writing in purports some very heavy things to protect ISKCON. But Prabhupada, because most of his preaching leela, he was operating as a madhya, making distinctions and calling a spade and preaching heavy. And so he had to re-give the history of the Gaudiya Math. And some of it wasn't pretty toward the end. And it angered a lot of his godbrothers. So, but in the uttam mood of just being grateful, in the end, Prabhupada not scolding anybody anymore, just expressing gratitude, he said, call all the godbrothers. And so many of them came, and there was one, I think it was Ashram Maharaj, who became kind of the spokesman, because Prabhupada, as soon as they were seated at Prabhupada's lotus feet, and Prabhupada is on his disappearance bed, what would become his disappearance bed. And he said, please forgive me. I am an offender. I'm trying to think of the word now Prabhupada used. I am Mahapatita. I am greatly fallen. I have said so many things that disturbed you. And I am Mahapatita. So Ashram Maharaj says, no, you're not Mahapatita. You're Mahapatita Pavana. You save the fallen. You're our leader. You can chastise us. You did what no one ever did. By the end, there were more godbrothers who were finally recognizing that Swami Maharaj did what nobody else did. He was the most empowered because he was the most surrendered, willing to risk life and limb. So there was a kind of reconciliation of sorts at the end. And then Prabhupada created this Bhaktivedanta Swami Charity Trust to try to help, these isolated, fragmented Gaudiya Maths in Navadvip Mandal, at least in Navadvip Mandal, Lord Chaitanya's area. So in a nutshell, as Harishari told me, because I said, how am I supposed to relate? Because Prabhupada would write very heavy letters to people, don't take intimate siksha from them. It's, they destroyed the Gaudiya mission and this and that. So now here we are 50 years later, or 40 years, let's see, 43 years after Prabhupada's disappearance, how do we relate to the Gaudiya Math? Well, it depends on the mutts. Those who still hold some grudge that Prabhupada allowed us to call him Prabhupada, we keep a respectful distance. You always have respect, but you might have to take some distance. But those who are really appreciative, like Bodhayan Maharaj, right? Who actually I think was the one who brokered, who negotiated this donation to the Bhaktivedanta Research Center. I'm pretty sure he was the key person, who was a disciple of Govinda Maharaj, who was a disciple of Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. So, Bodhayan Maharaj is a real good friend. So those who are friendly and cooperative, we work with them, because we can do great stuff. You know, the more united we stand. We're going to hear in the next lesson, next Sunday, or next Saturday, I forget which it is, Ananda. Sunday. We're going to hear, it's called To Love is to Cooperate. That's where we deepen our love for Prabhupada. It's the Prayojana. It's a lesson from the Prayojana section. And Prabhupada is hitting on this cooperation thing. So, yeah, the more we can all cooperate, the more we can be blessed with this spiritual synergy to do more than we could do alone. So Bodhayan Maharaj showed that. He said, yeah, what Prabhupada did is unparalleled. Yeah. So he wants to help ISKCON grow. So we keep a respectful distance from those who just can't bring themselves to appreciate what Prabhupada did. But we appreciate those who appreciate Prabhupada and work with them. That's sort of it in a nutshell. Do you want to add anything more, Krishnadas?
No, I think that pretty well covered it. And, again, just thank you very much. And hopefully we can get some other questions. But, you really did, for the last 2 hours, we've been with Prabhupada, even though it's your picture there. I mean, we're just sitting here absorbed in Prabhupada. So thank you so much.
That means we're doing our job, right? I mean, what else do we have to do?
And you do it so well.
As Shiksha, Diksha Gurus, we're going to leave this world soon, right? We got to pass on the legacy. It's not just us guys. Prabhupada is the foundational spiritual master, Shiksha Guru, for all generations, for all time, for as long as they're in ISKCON, and God willing, it'll be 10,000 years. So yeah, we have to keep that path that Prabhupada opened back to Godhead, that broad and opulent path. We have to keep it open wide and flowing and decorated and fulfill all the desires of Prabhupada. We have a lot to do.
Right.
I just want to, Prabhu, we just very greatly appreciate your transferring Prabhupada's mood strongly and nicely to all of us.
It's thank you, Purnamasi. Prabhu, it's a very expansive mood. He wanted everybody to grow up and not only take shelter, but be shelter. He wanted everybody to be gurus. We need millions of gurus. We have Prabhupada on record.
Okay.
Got a long way to go. We've got less than 100 people initiating. We're constipated. What's going on here? Come on. So we're working on that in the Sabha. So I hope we can help this kind of guru culture, open up a little more.
Okay. And I think there's probably a lot of other people with questions, so we'll just kind of mute ourselves and listen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the encouragement. Very kind.
Thank you so much, Krishnadas, Kaviraj Prabhu, and Mother Purnamasi. Wonderful question and great answer, Prabhu. Thank you very much. So on that answer, Prabhu, there is a question from Trinidad. The question is, can you please speak about why it would have been an issue with Gaudiya Math when Srila Prabhupada let us call him Prabhupada?
Yeah, well, because this happened actually in 1972. Prabhupada in 1972 invited his godbrothers for the groundbreaking ceremony of ISKCON Mayapur, because with a lot of endeavor, Prabhupada deputed the late Tamal Krishna Maharaj to secure land in Mayapur. And so there was actually some resistance from people, even within the old Gaudiya Math, that didn't think that Swami Maharaj, with his Mlecha Yavana disciples, should defile the holy land of Mayapur. So there was actually resistance coming from people who just couldn't bring themselves to appreciate what Swami Maharaj was doing. But Prabhupada knew this. He knew exactly where the resistance was coming from. But being magnanimous, after they secured the land, after it was dramatic the way TKG brought that first deed to Prabhupada. Prabhupada was in Calcutta, or let's see, where was he? Oh, he was in Mayapur, and then TKG was in Calcutta negotiating, and he's, with great difficulty, Tamal Krishna Maharaj brought the deed to Prabhupada in that hut and said, no, what am I saying? There was no hut yet. Yeah, Prabhupada was still in Calcutta. Yeah, and they were both in Calcutta. So there was this guy in Calcutta, but Tamal Krishna Maharaj was going and to secure, and he was negotiating, and Prabhupada and Tamal Krishna Maharaj got the deed and brought it, and Prabhupada stayed up waiting for him. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj famously brought Prabhupada the deed with full dandavats, extending his arms with the deed. The land is yours, Prabhupada. This is that first parcel, where the gate is and then the hut is. Where the hut is now. And Prabhupada said, you should keep this hut. Even when we develop, you should keep and show what we were and what Lord Chaitanya has allowed us to become. And so there it is, the hut, and the big super contrast with the TOVP now, right? So I'm so getting worked up that I forgot the question again. What was the question? And why they object?
Gaudiya Math.
Yeah. Okay. So Prabhupada invited them. So it was a tense scene, because on the one hand, Prabhupada had done what Srila Bhaktivedanta had asked them all to do, but still they had objections to the way Prabhupada was doing it. I mean, some of these people couldn't bring themselves to give credit where credit was due. So they were objecting on these details. They said, Swami Maharaj, why are you letting your disciples call you Prabhupada? Because as far as they were concerned, that was only for the likes of, a ray of Vishnu, like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, or like Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, Manjari Gopi. So why are you letting your disciples call you Prabhupada? So Prabhupada said, Brahmananda, get me my stationery. So I think Brahmananda must have gone to Prabhupada's quarters. No. Yeah, he must have just gone to the hut. Anyway, he got a piece of stationery and showed them his stationery, where it says, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Founder Acarya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. No Prabhupada. So I'm not calling myself Prabhupada, but look, they wanted to honor me with a name that they thought was befitting what I was doing. So I let them call me Swamiji. And then when they wanted to change it, I said, no, it's not very important. But then they insisted. It came from them. It didn't came from me. And I had to start a whole new organization, because I asked all of you to please cooperate and help me revive the Gaudiya mission. And you couldn't do this. Malati overheard the whole thing. And she couldn't follow. It was all in Bengali. But she picked up enough of it through the mood and through certain words that she was hearing. ISKCON and Gaudiya Math, that I had to make a fresh start. And then I had to I had to become the head of this institution. So it's not one man's business. Anyway, I had to do that. I had to let them start a whole new, I had to revive the Gaudiya mission. And who was the founder Acharya of the Gaudiya mission? Our Prabhupada. But I had, out of duty, I had to do it. And then they had another objection, which was even heavier. Why are you letting men and women serve together? And they were standing pat on a principle that Narada Muni was telling Yudhisthira Maharaj in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam. That man is like butter in a pot and a woman's like fire, and then when you put the butter pot too close to the fire, the butter melts. And it was very well, it was a well-taken principle. That's a principle. So what did Prabhupada say? You know, my dear godbrothers, when I went to the West, you know what I found? I found that from the time boys and girls are toddlers, they are freely mixing. And then they go to the same school together and they're educated together. They're always mixing. And you can't just, you have to work with what you find. You can't change a culture overnight. And so actually, he didn't, oh, this is 72. Later, 7 months later, Prabhupada told Shruti Kirti, 7 months after that tense meeting, Prabhupada told Shruti Kirti in Manila in the Philippines, Prabhupada was going back to this moment. I'm going to go back to it, but he said, my godbrothers criticize me that I have let men and women serve together in temples. In the temples, this is not allowed in India. In India. And then he said to Shruti Kirti, but I have become successful because I made this adjustment. For Prabhupada, it was a detail. It wasn't an ironclad, everlasting principle. Or you could say it was a higher principle. What is Prabhupada to do? Bar 50% of the human race from accessing the mercy of Mahaprabhu? Not let women join the boys that are coming? You know, Jadharani was the first girl. She came in October. She joined a whole boys club there. So because I have made this adjustment, I have become successful. And then famously, Shruti Kirti, he starts thinking, oh, now I got to ask a question. Oh, and I'm giving away the next lesson, so I won't tell what happened after that. I won't tell the punchline. Anyway, you probably know it anyway. But anyway, Prabhupada said, because I have made this adjustment, I have become successful. I have let men and women serve together. Certainly, with etiquette, you know, it's not an orgy. Come on, you have men and women serve, and there's etiquette. Here, you have certain etiquettes, right? So that was actually a bigger objection. But Prabhupada kind of pacified them, you know, when he said that they insisted, and I had to do, you know, what Guru Maharaj did. He had to become the Prabhupada of the Gaudiya mission. Well, I had to do the same thing because you wouldn't. I didn't want to start anything new. I didn't want to become the founder Acharya or the Prabhupada of something new, but I had to do it. So sorry, but that's what he had to do. So that's why he objected. That's why they objected, because they couldn't recognize him. And that was 72. But as I said, by 77, more and more were recognizing that, because by then he had spread it all over the world, 108 temples, grand style. And it was like, wow. And I have a story that's not enough time to tell it, but a story of what happened after Prabhupada left. Anyway, about what one godbrother said to our B.B. Govinda Maharaj. I practically have to tell it now, right? Because it was, who was it? It was, what's his name? Okay, I'm not remembering.
Akintana.
Krishna Das Babaji, yes. Yes. Did you know that your Guru Maharaj is the greatest spiritual master who ever lived? Did you know that? And here's a Diksha disciple of Araya Vishnu telling Ayodhyapati Prabhu, that was Bibi's former name, that he's the greatest spiritual master who ever lived. Did you know that? And Bibi Govinda, of course, he's devastated. Prabhupada has just left. It's the next morning. He doesn't know what to say. He's devastated that Prabhupada's left our vision, and he's amazed simultaneously that the Diksha disciple of Araya Vishnu is saying this to him. Do you know why he's the greatest spiritual master who ever lived? Because he did what no one ever did. He spread Harinam, the length and breadth of this earth. That's why. Hare Krishna. So by the time Prabhupada left, more and more we're recognizing. And now, it's no contest. I mean, okay.
Wonderful, Prabhu. So,
Yes.
so thank you so much, Prabhu. I know a few more questions have been coming through the private chat forum, but maybe we will hold it and bring it up next Sunday when we have time, if it becomes relevant to the topic that you'll be covering. So on that note, Prabhu, we'd like to sincerely thank you and offer our sincere gratitude to you. And we also had devotees from Trinidad and Ottawa as well, Ottawa, Canada as well, which I missed out earlier. So again, we would like to thank each one of you for attending today's seminar, and please let other devotees also know about the concluding part of this 3-part seminar next Sunday, same time as well. So yesterday Prabhu covered part 1, which was Sambandha, and that was our founder Acharya. And today it was Abhideya, activity, which is mission's roots. And on Sunday, 13th September, part 3, which is the concluding part, which is Prayojana, to love is to cooperate.
And that is the most challenging lesson of the whole series. It's the hardest thing to do in Kali Yuga is to cooperate. So fasten your seatbelts and hang on to your bead bag, because it's quite a challenge.
Wonderful, Prabhu. So
and I try to tackle it. So let's see what happens.
Guru Prasad in Ottawa is also our god brother. Let's not forget that, and such a wonderful devotee, and he remembered the name, which is wonderful. Krishna.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Well, you obliged me to tell the short form of the story. There's more to it.
Thank you.
I see you, Krishna Das and Purnamasi. Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We will see you all next Sunday at the same time for the concluding part of the seminar. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Ki jai.
Haribo.
Haribo. Haribo.
Hari Hari Bol.